I have heard of singles that have had people look down at them for being a gospel doctrine teacher. Like, how could they possibly do that?
How could you teach the gospel
exactly
if you're not married? Hey, everybody. We're here today with our guest, Dr. Kim Cobbler. We're very excited to share with you some of her experiences, her stories, and her emphasis on the journey of single adults in the 40-plus age category. Enough of me introducing you. Let's head on over to you, Kim, for an introduction.
I have my doctorate in behavioral health management, and I'm currently a coach. I'm working on writing my book, and I just recently started the podcast on Thriving LDS Singles, which is for 40-plus singles.
But the 35 plus are also allowed to
consume
the media.
Yes, we're even going to have some interviews with the 30 plus. So definitely. And then I have 3 kids, 3 adult children, 3 amazing grandchildren, and I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. Oh, and I have a dog, Ellie, that is my best friend. So
never
can't forget her. She'd be really upset.
Never to leave out the pet. Yes, that was a great addition. So I was looking for the words for this, and I think before the show we said quest was a good word. You discussed this subject. You have a podcast about it, writing a book. In a way, your educational journey ties in. So my question is, what started this quest or this push to discuss this topic so openly?
I moved to Arizona 3 years ago. I didn't have any family or friends there. I was
complete transplant.
Yep, complete. And I'm fairly new. I'm not fairly new to the LDS Church because I grew up in Salt Lake City and I was baptized when I was younger and all those things. But I wasn't fully active in church until I became much older, until my divorce. And so I knew that I needed to connect to the LDS community, and that would be a good resource for me. So in making that connection, I started to meet a lot of really amazing people and realized how important and maybe uncelebrated the 40-plus LDS single community is. I mean, this is a population that has been through some of the hardest, most terrible things you can imagine in life: abuse, betrayal, loss, and have gone through so many things, have maybe not had the support of their LDS leaders, not out of, not them not wanting to support them, but just it's a hard thing to know how to adequately support them. And so their faith has been tested probably more than any population I can think of. And
that's a really good, something I maybe didn't think about. If you are in the church and over the age of 40 and you are single, there's 3 ways you got there. Either you are widowed or have lost your spouse, you are divorced, both of which are really hard things, or you just happen to have been single for your entire life in the church. Also a hard thing.
Yeah.
There's really no easy way to arrive to this stage in life for anybody.
And they're not, none of those 3 were a choice or the choice that you would naturally make. Yeah. So you're always faced with feeling like potentially a failure or having some kind of deficit just because of the mere fact that you're single and in that age category.
One of the things that I was reminded of as you were talking about this is the uniqueness of the challenges, not only single people 40 plus face, but those within the church. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to speak to that. What have you seen are some of those unique challenges that this demographic faces within the church?
Well, first I've learned that 40 plus, there are like 3 major differences or seasons of life that 40 plus is going through.
Okay, I like this category.
Yeah. So when you're in that first phase or that season and you're divorced or single, you probably still have children that are dependent on you and that you're trying to take care of. And you have all these challenges of potentially a spouse bringing a new partner into your children's lives and all the complexity of whether or not they have the same parenting beliefs and methods and how to integrate that in. They might not even have the same spiritual beliefs or values. One of the interviews we did was with Chelsea, who her husband came out gay. And they fought hard to stay in that relationship because she made a covenant and wanted to keep it. But eventually it just wasn't going to work. And so she not only is faced with raising her kids, but now she has this other home, and she's managed to stay really close to her ex, but they still have very different values and beliefs in their home systems. And she's trying to navigate that. So that's one set of issues with
That's a big
LDS
stressor.
single, huge stressor. And then to be alone doing it and trying to provide and take care of your family. And then there's my section, which is the empty nesters. I call it the oh crap season because you now your children are gone. And so you don't have that. They're not dependent on you anymore, and you have a little more time to reflect and recognize that you're no longer on the upside of the longevity curve, and that your time is starting to feel a little more limited, and like, oh, I have a limited amount of time, and I just went through this huge life disruption, and I've got a lot of things to do. And like me, I didn't get my patriarchal blessing till I was 52, and it tells me right in there, you have work to do. And so I feel this pressure of, I've got to make up for a lot of lost time and be able to fulfill my dreams and things.
It's like there's this quiet period.
Yeah.
Once the chaos of the kids is gone, the dust settles a little bit, and in the quiet you have those realizations you're talking about of the things you want to accomplish, the things you want to change.
And you're alone. And you
are
wish
alone
you weren't
in that
single.
journey.
Yeah. And then the last kind of group is the retireds, that potentially they have lost their spouse early, and they're struggling with, well, I've already been sealed in the temple, and I just want to go be with my partner, and I've lived a really full and meaningful life, but I'm still here, and the one I love isn't. And how do I manage that? Or, sometimes sadly they're faced with having to start over at that age and being retired. And there's a lot more loneliness and issues with loneliness in that demographic. So even in that population, there's all these different phases of challenges of just being single. And those are challenges that anyone that's single in those phases of life are being faced with.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we feel like being LDS is a bigger challenge because we're a family-focused church, and it can be perceived as somehow a failure. And that is something I want to say, is that, that's easy to think. That I think sometimes there are a lot of judgments of, and we get asked a lot, well, did you try hard enough? Did you work hard enough?
Yeah.
Did you pray and fast about this? We joke about that because, of course, that's like, because many of the relationships were covenant relationships, and they fought till they could no longer fight to stay in those relationships.
This is the most important thing to you. You didn't give up.
Yeah, this isn't we just fell out of love.
It wasn't.
Or, so anyway, that group of people are, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought.
Which is great because
you want to ask a question?
No. Well, I always want to ask a question, but it can be cut if you want. If it doesn't come back, I'm waiting in the wings, Kim.
Okay, good.
Going through a journey, we respect the things we learn along the way, and you don't wish it away, hardships or the things that you learned. But I do find this question insightful. If you could go back to the start of this journey, the divorce, what would you like to have told yourself in regards to what you've learned going along this path?
Oh, wow. That's a really hard question because...
Perfect.
Because if the things, what I wish I could have told myself then would have totally changed the trajectory of my life.
Yes.
And I'm really happy that I have 3 amazing kids, and that I went through the hardships and some of the struggles that I did, because I grew a lot. It's really hard to even imagine being able to go back and tell my younger self, hey, you need to do these things. What would I tell myself? I would tell myself to be more authentic and to not be so frightened to be myself, and to not, I was just such a huge people pleaser in my marriage and in the relationship that I really lost sight of myself. And so
being cognizant of that would be a big one.
Yeah. But if I would have been more cognizant of that, I'm sure we wouldn't have stayed married for 35 years.
Fair enough. Which would have altered the course of the journey, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
Here's a random pop culture reference. As we've been talking about this that I thought about, there is a famous actor named Keanu Reeves. Are you familiar?
Yeah.
The Matrix is what I think most people know him from. I'm going to totally botch this quote by him, but it's related. He's not married, I'm pretty sure. Maybe that's outdated, and hasn't been for a while. And someone asked him about, is that lonely? You're a Hollywood star. Don't you want someone to share this with? You haven't been in relationships. And his response was something to the effect of, I think it's really important to learn to enjoy spending time with yourself, to appreciate who you are, the things that you like. And if you can enjoy spending time with yourself and learn to love yourself, then spending time with other people and your relationships, they don't become a necessity. They become kind of a luxury, something you get to enjoy. And I don't completely agree with the sentiment. I think relationships are a necessity, but I liked the idea of what he was saying, that being lonely is hard, and you do need relationships, but also learn to like spending time with yourself and to love who you are.
Yeah. I would say that's the biggest piece of advice that you want the 40 plus single community to do is this is your opportunity to make that investment. And I think it's harder if you have your kids still at home and you're working on trying to help them learn how to be thriving.
Yes, the alone time might not come.
Yeah. But once you have those opportunities, investing in yourself is just so critical, because that you do have to learn how to be comfortable and love and care about yourself and be an individual. I always say 1 + 1 = 3 in a relationship, because you have you and you have the other person, and together there's a third. And it's not that you mesh. I mean, that was the danger, I guess, in my relationship, is there was just so much enmeshment that you couldn't discern. I couldn't even discern who I was anymore. Yeah. So that's not healthy. And so the last thing you want to do is, when you're single, is not invest that time in your healing and in building your self-confidence and your self-esteem and feeling okay about being with yourself and loving that. And then it is the icing on the cake to add an individual into that relationship. And we aren't meant to be alone, and relationships are really hard. Like, it's very easy
they are work, they are struggle.
Yeah. And it's very easy to be single and just stay comfortable in my little safe condo and do all the things I want to do whenever I want to do them, and not have to negotiate with somebody or coordinate schedules or do
Kimmy
something you don't want to do.
She goes where she wants, and she does it when she wants.
Exactly.
Hard to give up.
It is hard to give up. Even, I love, like, there would be nothing better than to cuddle up next to somebody, but, then they might snore or or I might not get to use the whole bed for myself when I want to, or, so there's give and take, but
there's an opposition in all things.
That's right. Yes. That's right. But we, so it could be really easy to get complacent and comfortable in being single if you make that investment in being alone. But that's not what we're meant to do. I mean, that's definitely not from an LDS perspective. We're meant to be in families and relationships. And there's a reason that they're hard. And there's a lot of growth opportunity in relationships. And it's important to make that investment.
I liked what you were saying about the need of relationships, or the necessity that we have for them. And I was curious, being a member of the church, how has the gospel perspective impacted the lens through which you view relationships?
I think family and relationships is one of the biggest reasons why we're here and why we were put on the earth. I mean, that's part of learning how to build a community, learning how to become like our Heavenly Father is, and embrace our identity is to embrace having those relationships. The gospel teaches that from the very beginning. Why could Adam just be here all by himself if that wasn't a big part?
Man or woman to be alone. Relationships, it's one of the first gospel truths.
It's exactly.
I love that.
I think as a single, you sell yourself short if you say, well, that's, I don't need that. I'm good with my singleness. It might be different for those. See, in my case, I haven't been sealed in the temple to anyone. My kids aren't sealed to me. So those things really hit me hard, because my singleness means I don't have an eternal partner. But there are lots of people that do have an eternal partner, and it might be somebody they don't want to have an eternal relationship with.
There's another side to that coin. That's true.
But I mean, that's all part of the process. I really believe that is why we're here. That like from the very beginning, that it's a part of our journey and becoming, learning how to embrace our divinity here on earth.
What would our experience on earth be like if we were just alone? It would be so, for one, it would be very difficult. And so much of the joy of this world is sharing the joy that we experience with our relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the Lord does. He wants to share the joy he experiences with us.
Exactly.
One other thing I was thinking about that you touched on a little bit, especially when you're talking about sealing and being sealed to children or spouse, in this church that is so family-centric, so temple-centric, how do you find an identity as a single person in this church? How do you, when you may not fit the ideal that even you're striving towards?
Yeah, I think President Nelson helped us with that. Our identity are, the three things. We're first and foremost a child of God. And I can't remember the next order, disciple of Christ, and then a child of the covenant. And none of those require you to be married necessarily.
That's a really good point.
And so I think that is the message, that those are really our identity. And that's one thing I really wanted to stress is all the things we're talking about in being single and the challenges are true for anyone who's single that may or may not be religious. And sometimes we look at it as a deficit as singles, like somehow we are missing something because we're single. But in reality, we are so blessed to be a part of the LDS community and to have that sense of identity and purpose. Because can you imagine what being single and having all those same challenges would be like if we didn't have that, if we couldn't go to church every Sunday? And they say going to a faith-based practice at least 4 times a week increases our longevity. And that's kind of naturally built into our system. Yeah. And we get to go to a place where there is a bunch of people who are trying to be like Christ and loving and caring no matter what, every Sunday. So we have so many benefits that people who are single don't have. And we sometimes forget about that or don't think about it that way. And we really need to learn how to leverage that as singles instead of feel like we're functioning from not belonging or being at a deficit.
I liked that you pointed those 3 identities out as being part of that blessing that we enjoy as members of the church, both being a child of God, a child of the covenant, and a disciple of Jesus Christ. And as you pointed out, those are all our relationships with God and Jesus Christ, which are, the most important ones that we have. So my next train of thought to go along with this had to do with supporting brothers and sisters within the church who are single.
Yeah.
Whether it be losing your spouse or divorce, sometimes you don't always know how to help or support people. You might feel awkward broaching the subject. Yeah. What would you say to members who are wondering that if they've had someone?
Well, first of all, I have to speak to the singles because it really is their responsibility, because you're right. People don't know what to say in those challenging times, and they're going to say the wrong things.
So be prepared first and foremost.
Yeah, I can't
for some wrong things to be said.
Exactly. I can't tell you the times I left crying my eyes out because of something somebody said while I was going through my divorce that they had no idea would be like a stab to the heart.
Well-intentioned.
Well-intentioned.
A stab nonetheless.
Exactly. Okay. So, and everybody wants to give. I mean, it is a well-intentioned group. And so we have to keep that in mind, I think, as singles. And then from what do you do on the other side, I do think there are some challenges. For example, depending on your culture, and I actually really like being in Arizona, in Scottsdale, Arizona, for this reason. Like, I'm the second counselor in the Relief Society, which may or may not have been a calling that I would receive as a single person, depending on the culture.
Oh, good point.
In other areas, and that's just not a thing where I'm at. But
in that case, maybe here, like a bishopric or whoever might look and be like, oh,
yeah,
like things are harder for her.
yeah,
Maybe
or
this
not
isn't
qualified,
the right calling
or
for her.
maybe they do have a
Yeah.
judgment about some kind of perceived failure on my part because I'm single. So, and I have heard of singles that have had people look down at them for being a gospel doctrine teacher. Like, how could they possibly do that?
How could you teach the gospel
exactly
if you're not married? The audacity.
Exactly. So I think they can definitely offer some grace. And, you know, there's always two sides of every story. So, you know, a lot of times the wife stays in the family ward and the husband leaves, or vice versa. And a lot of times they're going through all those hard things in a family ward, and it's easy to make judgments or things. And so just be really generous and gracious about what your assumptions are, because you never know the whole story.
That's golden advice in many situations,
Yeah.
I think. You don't know the whole of the situation.
Yeah.
Really only the Lord knows what's happening entirely in people's hearts.
And that, you know, you bring up a good point, because that's what we end up telling ourselves as we navigate through that is, God and I know what's really going on, and that's all that matters right now. And you just pray hard a lot to get through those. So the other thing I think is that a lot of people are faced in this community with starting. I think the church can do a lot more. Like, we're going to be interviewing somebody who's one of the regional counselors over singles in Arizona soon. And she literally went to every bishop in her stake and said, I don't want to know the details, but if they're okay to hold a calling or not. And she called every single bishop, and then she went to her stake president and said, here's my list of people that I want you to call into these positions. Because like in my stake, there are no single coordinators at all. So like in my particular stake, we don't have a set of single activities, and activities are important because, you know, where else are we going to go build networks and communities? It's not about dating. That's, you know, the activities are not there.
What you're saying. If you're not meeting together, there's a lot.
Yeah. And we need to band together. We need to know that we have each other's backs. We need to build that community and those networks, because that makes us happier, healthier people. And so as church leaders, the recognition, and it's easy to forget, because especially when you're married and have families and all these things going on, you don't think about it from a single perspective, but we need to build those communities. And so that would be the other thing. And then the last thing would be, I think we have so many amazing programs in the church. We have addiction recovery programs. We have LDS counseling. We have the self-reliance programs, which there's, when I went through the Build Your Own Business one, I have lots of single friends that have gone to the Go Back and Get Your Degree self-reliance program and the budgeting program. I think they need another one. I think they're starting to recognize, even with like missionaries, that there's a really big challenge with transitioning back into mainstream.
Yes. And
that we need to help people manage their anxiety and making that transition successfully.
Reintegrating into life.
Reintegrating to life. And for that single community, and really for anyone undergoing any kind of change in life, there needs to be a course or some coaching help or a self-reliance program that helps them navigate their way through big transitions like that. Because some of them are starting completely over and have to start from the ground up with, how do I find a job if I've been a stay-at-home mom? How do I build a career? How do I even know what my purpose in life is if I now have to switch from being a stay-at-home mom to being a provider? I mean, there's so many things, and we don't have a program to help them navigate and help them manage their anxiety in making those transitions. So,
and in a way, this is a cool bookend. So in the beginning, we want to know what started this quest of aiding, helping, and discussing the subject of 40 plus single adults. And in lieu of not seeing this program, it seems like you have embarked on filling this niche.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Not even a niche. This is a pretty big area.
Yeah, it is not a niche. It's a big population. It's 60% of our church is single. And so
Yeah, not niche, vast majority.
There you go. But the challenges are we have to find ways to build a really strong, healthy community, which means investing in your own personal mental health and care.
Yeah.
But then also building a network of people you can count on. There's another challenge is single women don't have priesthood in the home, and that can be really hard. Who do I go to? Do I feel comfortable enough in my ward family to ask somebody for a priesthood blessing for silly stuff, or calling in the middle of the night because I'm having a panic attack over something, or, who knows what it is. So you have to build those relationships, and it's the responsibility, I think, of both parts. But the other thing is, sadly, like Kay, my co-host, she lives in Australia, and they have 9 stakes in the Brisbane area where she is, which is pretty awesome. That's a pretty good community.
Number. Yeah.
And they do have single activities, but I hear from a lot of people that, live in Minnesota that have a tiny little branch, and they're lucky to have members, let alone singles, that they can build a community around. So where do they go to feel a sense, to get inspired and to feel hopeful about their future, and to maybe be able to find a partner someday, if that's, what probably all of our goals should be. But we also have to get comfortable with knowing that we might be alone for the rest of our life.
Might be the reality of the situation.
Yeah. So the podcast is intended to not only celebrate the singles, because we have interviewed some amazing, thriving people that we hope will inspire those that might still be really struggling, but then also to let everyone know that we're going to build a community, and that you can feel hopeful and be strong in your faith. You don't have to leave the faith to find a partner, and all those challenges that you face when you're not in a really strong, dense population of LDS people.
It's a different circumstance.
Yeah.
You mentioned 2 things. One, what is the name of the podcast?
Thriving LDS Singles.
Thriving LDS Singles. Mm-hmm. And I've seen you guys on YouTube, and I think you're on other platforms.
We're trying. I'm just getting ready to put us on Spotify. So we're almost there. We're going to be on Spotify, and then we're just starting a Facebook group so that people can contribute and interact with us more. So we'll start a Facebook group and an Instagram for just Thriving LDS Singles. So
rolling forward, advancing. My last thought about community, as we were talking about gathering, the Savior said, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am also. And sometimes we just think of church when we think of gathered in my name. But even just getting together with friends for the sake of loving each other, for the sake of supporting each other, the Savior is there when we do that as well. And I think that's another really important part of this community, is to help the Savior be invited more fully into our lives and receive that strength. Well, Dr. Cobbler, Dr. Kim Cobbler, we have loved having you on the show today. Be sure to check out her podcast in the link to this video, and we will see you next time.